All right, the distance formula is the square root of the difference of the x's squared plus the difference of the y's squared. The midpoint, well, there's two things. The x value for the midpoint is x1 plus x2 over 2, and the y value of the midpoint is y1 plus y2 over 2. And the slope is the difference of the y's, that's the rise, over the difference in the x's, that's the run. Oops. Okay, so if I want to do the distance, I'm going to do this. The distance is equal to the square root of x2, which is 4, minus x1, which is 2, squared, plus the difference of the y's, which is 6 minus 8, squared, which is 2 squared plus negative 2 squared, which is 4 plus 4, which is the square root of 8, which we'll write as 4 times 2, and then we'll take the 4 out and we'll get a 2, so the final answer is 2 root 2. To find the midpoint of these, the x value of the midpoint is the sum of the x's, 2 plus 4 over 2, which is 3, so that's the x value, and the y value of the midpoint is the y1 plus y2, which is 8 plus 6, which is 7. The slope is the difference of the y's, so 6 minus 8 over the difference of the x's, so 4 minus 2. For the midpoint, the x value of the midpoint is the sum of the x's, so the x value is negative 1/2, and the y value I know is going to be 10 because they're the same. But you can do this if you want. It's 10 plus 10 over 2, but I knew that was going to be 10 because they were the same. So finally, the slope is y2 minus y1. y2 is 10 minus y1 is 10. We know we're going to get a 0 on the top, so I know the slope is going to be 0 because there's going to be some non-zero number down at the bottom. 3 minus negative 4, that's going to be a 7, but 0 over that is still 0. So when the y values are the same, the slope is 0. If the x values were the same, it would be an undefined slope. Okay, this problem, the y values are the same, so the distance is just the difference between those two values. So if you remember, distance is always positive, so you can go 3 minus a negative 4, which is 3 plus 4, which is 7. So the distance between them is 7. You don't need to do that distance formula. If you accidentally subtracted the other way, and you did negative 4 minus 3, it's the absolute value of that, which is the absolute value of negative 7, which is still 7. Okay, last problem. I'm going to move my 2w to the left by subtracting it from each side. That means I move my 7 to the right by adding it to each side. So on the left, I've got 4w minus 2w is 2w. And on the right, 9 plus 7 is 16. And we'll solve by dividing by 2. So we're going to get w equals 8. And that's it. Number 4, the distance is the square root of the difference of the x's. So negative 1 minus a negative 2. That'll be negative 1 plus 2. And the difference of the y's is negative 6 minus a negative 4. That's going to be 6 plus 4. So this is going to be negative 1 plus 2 is positive 1 squared, and negative 6 plus 4 is a negative 2 squared, which is the square root of 1 plus 4, which is the square root of 5, and that's the distance. The x value of the midpoint is the sum of the x's, negative 2 plus negative 1 over 2, which is negative 3 over 2. And the y value for the midpoint is the sum of the y's, negative 4 plus a negative 6 over 2, which is negative 10 over 2, which is negative 5. The slope is the difference of the y's, so negative 6 minus a negative 4, over the difference of the x's, which is a negative 1 minus a negative 2. Up top you have negative 6 plus 4, which is negative 2. On the bottom you have negative 1 plus 2, which is a positive 1. So this reduces to negative 2. That's the slope. Alright, when we're reducing this radical, we're looking for the biggest perfect square factor of 75, which is 25. So I'll write that as 25 times 3. And we'll take out the 25 by square rooting, and it becomes a 5, and it leaves behind that 3, so we have 5 root 3. Okay, so we have a 4 on the outside, and I'm going to rewrite 8. The biggest perfect square factor of 8 is 4, so I can write it like that. And then we'll take out the 4 by square rooting it, and it becomes a 2. This 2 multiplies with that 4 and becomes an 8, and it leaves behind the 2. So this is 8 root 2. Okay, I'm going to rationalize the denominator by multiplying by root 5, so that's going to give us a 5 on the bottom. So we have to do that on top as well, so that gives us 15 root 5. And then I'm going to cancel. 5 goes into 5 once, into 15 3 times, so this is going to be 3 root 5. There's lots and lots of ways to do this. I think probably the easiest, because this is already a perfect square, I'm going to take this out, and we're going to have 4 in the numerator. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by root 5 on the top and bottom, because that's going to give me a root 100 on the bottom. And this will be root 5, because I'm multiplying by root 5 on the top and bottom. The reason you do that is because square root of 100 is 5. So now you take this out, it's 10. And that's going to become a 10 when you take it out. So now we've got 4 root 5 over 10. But that's not simplified either, so I can cancel. 2 goes into that twice and into this 5 times. So simplified, you're going to have 2 root 5 over 5. You know, there's a lot of ways you could have gotten to that final answer. For number 9, when I square this entire thing, I have to square each part. So when I square the 3, I get 9. When I square the square root of 5, I just get that without the square root. And 9 times 5 is 45. Lots of ways to do this problem. I'm going to make this a 2 to begin with. So I have 3 times 2, which is 6 here. And I'm multiplying that by 4 root 6. So my numbers outside the radical multiply together to give me 24. But I still have that root 6. And you could have done that a number of different ways. I think that would have been the easiest though. So when we multiply this, we're going to multiply the 3 and the 5 to get 15. And then we have an x to the 2 plus 3 is 5. And we have a y to the 3 plus 5 is 8. And there's nothing else you can do to simplify, so that's the answer. Okay, I'm going to bring this in, and so I'm going to have 7 squared, which is going to be 49, and I have x to the 2 times 5 is 10, and I have y to the negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. And then I'm going to simplify. I'm going to move this to the bottom of the fraction, and I'm going to make this a 49. So the top of the fraction is a 49, and we have x to the 10, and the bottom of the fraction is y to the 4. Okay, I'm going to start by just multiplying everything through here, and then I'll deal with the negative exponents. So negative 3 times negative 7 is a positive 21, and then I'm going to have x to the 4 plus 2 is 6. I'm going to have y to the negative 2 plus negative 3 is negative 5. And finally, I'm going to have z to the 3 plus 1 is 4. And then this is a negative exponent, so that's going to go to the bottom of the fraction, but everything else will stay in the top of the fraction. So the top is 21, x to the 6, z to the 4. and the bottom of the fraction is y to the 5. Okay, here before I multiply, I got to do my parentheses and my exponent, so I got to take this in. So I'm going to have 5 times 2 to the negative 3 x to the negative 3, which is really 5 times 1 over 2 to the 3 x to the 3. So when I multiply this, I'm multiplying, this is like a 5 over 1. So I'm going to go 5 times 1 is 5, that's my numerator. And then I'm going to simplify, 2 to the 3 is 8, but this remains x to the 3. And there's probably a number of different ways you could have gotten here as well. Here we're going to bring this in and we're going to give ourselves h to the negative 9, which is simply 1 over h to the positive 9. I'm going to take care of the negative part of the exponent first, which inverts this. So this is going to give me 12 over 5, and I took care of the negative part of the exponent, so now we just are squaring it. 12 squared is 144, and 5 squared is 25. Here I'm going to bring the negative x to the left by adding it to each side, and that'll give me 3x on the left. And I'll take the negative 4 to the right by adding it to each side, so that'll give me 14. And finally, I'm going to divide by 3. So I'm going to get x is equal to 14 over 3. All right, on the right-hand side, I'm going to distribute this. Well, the left-hand side didn't change, so I'll write that down. But this, when we distribute, will give us 6x plus 3. Now I'm going to move the x to the right. So I'm going to move this to the right by subtracting 5x from each side. And I'm going to move this to the left by subtracting 3 from each side. So when I subtract this, 6x minus 5x is 1x, and negative 2 and negative 3 give me negative 5. So x is equal to negative 5. Okay, for number 19, we're going to move the 2w this way by subtracting it from each side. And I'll move the 7 this way by adding it to each side. And we're going to get 2w is equal to 16. We'll divide by 2, and we'll get w is equal to 8. For number 20, we'll move the 2x this way by adding it to each side. And I'll move my 9 this way by subtracting it from each side. 7 minus 9 is negative 2. 3x plus 2x is 5x. And we'll divide by 5, and we'll get x is equal to negative 2/5. Okay, I'm going to get rid of my denominators by multiplying everything by 12. Oops. And then I'm going to cancel. 3 goes into this 4 times. When I multiply, I get 8x. 4 goes into this 3 times. I multiply and I get plus 3. And 6 goes into 12 twice, and I multiply and get 10. Then I'll move this 3 over by subtracting it. And I'll get 8x is equal to 7. And I'll divide by 8. And I'll get x is equal to 7/8.